What's up, everybody? This is Dante Cook with Bitcoin Simply, helping you to understand macro and markets in a simple way. I'm excited to invite you into a private webinar that I did with Gio, the power law guy, who's an astrophysicist and has done a lot of work to understand the physics of Bitcoin and why he believes that Bitcoin will reach between 160,000 to 240,000 in October or November of 2025. He's done a lot of work to show that Bitcoin goes parabolic 1 year upward, parabolic 1 year downward, and then 2 years sideways upwards. And he believes that Bitcoin is a power law. He's done the math to understand and determine that regardless of what Bitcoin does in the short term, it's a function of time. He believes that its price will continue to increase over time as it relates to the amount of time that it's been in existence. It's a fascinating concept and a fascinating model and framework. I hope that you get a lot out of the conversation that I had with Gio. You don't want to miss the next webinar that I'm having with a multi-sig expert, where we're going to actually walk through live how do we sign Bitcoin transactions, why you should consider a multi-sig as you're looking to protect your wealth, and all of the ways that you can do this. We're going to be going through live actual examples of setting up a multi-sig and how easy it is in order to store, send, and secure your Bitcoin to protect your financial freedom. What's up, everybody? This is Dante Cook with a special edition of our live webinars in conjunction with Bitcoin Simply. It's a show that I do multiple times a week on the Bitcoin Simply channel, where I help you to understand macro and markets in a simple way. Super excited for our Columbus members that we get to interact and connect with Giovanni Santostasi today, the astrophysicist, the Bitcoin power law guy. And I always want to caveat these sorts of things. This is really an opportunity for us to learn, for us to educate, for us to sharpen our tool set. All models are broken. Some are useful. Some are more useful than others. But none of this is financial advice. And we always say with Bitcoin, don't trust, verify, always do the work yourself. So with any model, with anything that's out there, we always want to try to fact check and back test on our own feelings and those sorts of things. And, you know, one thing that I really appreciate about the Bitcoin community is there's all sorts of differing views and opinions within that sphere. Sort of like in America, I saw this one talk about, you know, Republicans and Democrats. We're Americans here. And so we're Bitcoiners at the end of the day. And Gio's put in a ton of work on this model, has built a framework for how he sees, you know, Bitcoin, the price, time, the number of nodes, and how that correlates with how Bitcoin's price moves. So without further ado, I'm excited to welcome Gio onto the show.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here.
That is awesome. Thanks for joining us today. I wanted to just give a quick background. A lot of people don't know what astrophysics is. You know, that's kind of your background. So for all of us who just, you know, aren't nerds out there, I'm kind of a nerd on some of this stuff, but would love to know what astrophysics is and how you got into the field.
It's about understanding the universe, right? It's a kind of light topic. We want to understand the stars, the galaxies, black holes, how the universe got originated, through the Big Bang. So it's basically it's called astrophysics because, it's basically you use physics, the most fundamental science of them all, right? Because we study nature, all the different forces in nature, but in particular applied to things like the stars, the universe, and so on. It's a kind of a specialization of physics, is what astrophysics is about. Yeah. And I was interested in these things since I was a little kid, literally. I look at the stars. I thought they were fascinating. I asked my mom to buy me a telescope. I got a telescope, and we started from there, one step at a time. I realized that I was told that to be good in that field, I need to learn about math and study math very hard. And I found it fascinating. And the journey started from there, since I was a little kid.
So there's tons of rabbit holes to go down in terms of physics. How much do you or don't you like the movie Interstellar?
I love it, but in fact, I met actually the physicist that consulted for that. I met him, and he was exactly my field. I studied these gravitational waves, and he came to my university. We had a long conversation. He even signed my book. He has a beautiful book about black holes, etc. And he signed my book, and he said, "Oh, great conversation." It was cool. I met him. In general, I have a problem with science fiction movies because it's like almost like illness. So like you look at all the things, and some things are good, and like actually it's one of the best movie in terms of following the science. But there is always something where to say, it should not be like that, but because of the science, and it kind of spoils it for me, But
Yeah.
that movie probably is one of the best in that sense.
Well, that's how we know you're a true math guy. You can't let it slip, right? Like you gotta you gotta really dig in on it.
I cannot enjoy it. So why is like that?
So one question that I have, I know this is a big debate in the astrophysics field, from the Big Bang, intelligent design or complete randomness in terms of the universe and the earth and how things are.
The main problem with that is, if you try to explain the universe, the origin of the universe with something more complicated, the universe itself, like, some kind of divine entity, you're defeating the purpose, right? The entire goal with physics is, can we try to show that something simple can create something complicated, right? And this is what we are doing right now. We are coming closer and closer to explain the entire universe came basically from nothing, actually literally nothing. And there are a lot of indication from that, right? That it was a little symmetry breaking of nothing. But I find it beautiful. I find it amazing that everything can be derived from nothing. But it's a long topic. If you want, you can call me another time. We can talk.
Oh man, we could go for a long time on that one.
But these are some of the questions that is one of the things that attracted me when I was a kid. I wanted to understand why we are here, where we are, where we are coming from, where we are going, what is the direction in the future, And this is why I love Bitcoin, because, one of the things that maybe I can segue in this way, right? I discovered Bitcoin early on in 2010. I downloaded the wallet. I didn't do much with it, because I understood the value, but not completely. And then I found this article I'm very interested in. I have a lot of hobby and interest, but one is technology, in particular, how technology is going to change our lives in the future, right? All these things about AI, etc. I was interested, again, since I was pretty young about it, and I read about the possibility of AI, etc. And so I'm part of this movement called Techno-Optimism, that basically thinks that we can solve almost every problem with technology, even things like, for example, extending our lives, right? Living long life, maybe hundreds of years, so we can actually answer some of these questions, we can go deeper in reality, understand reality and so on, but also defeating poverty and anger in the world, all these problems. And this article that I read, I was part of this newsletter, he said, we are part of this movement. We want to change the world using science, technology, but we need funds for that, right? And many of us don't have the funds to do these kind of things. But there is this new thing called Bitcoin. And I bet this was 2013. The Bitcoin was $9 at that time. And this guy was such a visionary because he was interested in technology and science, but he had no problem to say, but if you follow me, my reasoning, you will see why one of these days Bitcoin will be $1 million or maybe $10 million. And I read the article. It was very well done. It's actually interesting to read these old articles about the origin of, the early Bitcoin articles when people had no clue, because some people don't have clue today. Imagine in 2013, right? But this guy was a visionary and he could see all these things that Bitcoin could be good at. And also the idea that one day it will be very, very valuable. And I read the article and immediately understood, yes, he's right. And I want to join in, And so I'm very grateful about that vision of the world to actually make me understand Bitcoin. And for me, I never understood people would say, oh, I came in contact with Bitcoin, but, I didn't know. For me, it was almost like love at first sight, because I understood the principle behind it. And I always treated it, even when it was $9, as if it was $1 million asset or $10 million asset. I never thought, oh, I'm going to sell my Bitcoin at $1,000 or, $5,000 or whatever. I always thought this is going to be a long-term investment. So that approach actually helped me to appreciate Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, speaking of, the tech optimists, and this sort of gets into your world and your framework, one of the biggest rebuttals that you hear about Bitcoin, and specifically from gold bugs, is that, I can touch it, I can feel it, I can taste it. It's funny, the most valuable companies in the world are all supporting products that we can't touch, taste, feel, or see. And even NVIDIA, right? This chip creator, the graphic processor company, is creating infrastructure to build a world that we can't physically touch and see, yet it's so close to becoming the most valuable company in the world. And I just don't believe that that's, a valuable argument. Google has indexed the world's information in a way that allows us to understand it, pretty quickly and easily. Yeah. And Bitcoin, what it's done for, value, right? It allows us to transport, transact, and record value in a way that's geographically distributed and, decentralized. And so I don't know how people can say, well, yeah, I think Facebook and Instagram are super valuable companies. They're just correlating and, connecting information and people around that information. And, Bitcoin is no different as a network. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts just on that tech optimism, on those old laws and how they kind of play into your law, like Moore's law or Metcalfe's law, or these laws that came out of those tech luminaries that informed the quote unquote non-tangible world that we live in today.
It's not just today. We have lived in an intangible world from the beginning, because almost everything we do is symbolic, right? Even all time. Now, of course, you're right, even more now than before, because even the gold bugs, right? If you buy gold, nobody's coming to your home with, sure, you can buy a little piece of gold, right? I have gold coins sitting on my desk from ancient times. Actually, I collect them, Romans and things like that. It's really cool. But mostly like a historical artifacts. They are beautiful coins. But, if you buy gold as an investment, hundreds of thousands of old gold, nobody comes with, a cart in your home and say, here is the gold that you order, and we dump it into your home, right? It's ridiculous. What are you touching? You're touching an electronic document, probably. Maybe they send you paperwork saying, here is your gold buying, right? You own somewhere in a vault some gold, but you have no proof of that. Nobody's taking even a picture of that. It's all electronic nowadays, right? All the transactions, all the money, 99.9, I don't know what it is, but it's all electronic, even normal cash that people use every day. So it's a silly argument, but even in ancient times, like Italian actually invented, fortunately and unfortunately, because of that time had a purpose, they invented the banknote, right? Banknote, banco, it's an Italian word from a little desk. So these were kind of money changers. They were dealing with different merchants, and at a certain point they realized it's too dangerous actually to bring the physical thing. They couldn't resolve it electronically, right, like we do right now. And so they went from one country to another. We had gold, other valuable coins, and they could be attacked by whatever, criminals, right, because it was much less safer than it was today, traveling around. And so they invented these little pieces of paper saying, hey, when you go to that country, exchange this piece of paper for this amount of money. The different people that were doing this business of being bankers had a network, right? That was also a network. And, somebody in Germany knew somebody in Florence, and they were connected in that way, and they were exchanging these banknotes, and eventually maybe there was some kind of delivery of real gold, but with guards, etc. But all the transactions were mostly done through these pieces of paper. This is how they created the banknotes, right? And then eventually it became kind of like money and so on. Actually, Italians invented it.
Bitcoin Venice is a great book, kind of talking a little bit about the history of this in double entry accounting.
Exactly. Then I realized the bad thing about that was, okay, if it's a piece of paper, maybe I can give 10 pieces of paper for one gold coin without keeping it for storage. And they invented, all this idea of multiply by many factors, whatever you have in reserve, right? Which is actually it's a terrible idea because it's basically like money printing, right? But it's silly when we say things like that. And you're right, our day, most of our lives is lived in this digital world that is very tangible because it's information, right? I would say for a physicist that, again, being a physicist opens so many doors. You start to see the world in a completely different way, almost everything. And in my case, for example, I went from astrophysics to actually neuroscience. But when I went to neuroscience, I started to look at that field with the physicist eye, and I started to get a lot of rewards. I got a patent within a couple of years that I entered that new field, and I was completely beginner at a start, and within 2 years I got a patent, because it allows you to see things in a completely different way. So I think with Bitcoin, a lot of my breakthroughs and discovering Bitcoin were because I started to use methods and approaches that very, very few people use, right? And now you started an introduction, talk about opinions and things like that. That is one of the things I'm trying to avoid as a physicist, to make opinions. When I discuss my charts, discuss my analysis, it's never about opinion. And I don't care about opinion. I don't care about even my opinion. It's about math, right? It's about facts and reality. So this is what the approach of a physicist is. We want to understand reality. And so, for a physicist, it's natural to think everything is information. And so, the internet makes it even more clear because it's all about exchanges of information. The fact that certain companies are valuable, like NVIDIA, is because they are supporting this new economy all based on information. But it's the most valuable thing because there is where everything is for human beings, right? The knowledge and how things interact with each other, that is information, right? It's the most important thing. Even when people were using solid things, the exchange of solid things was not the most important thing. It was the fact that now you add some information, that was signified by the piece of gold, but the information was now you have some wealth that you didn't have before. That is the update of your state, right? That is all about information. The fact that now people recognize, this guy is rich because he has this piece of material, but it was not a piece of material because it could have been any other material. It was the fact that it was this shiny piece of metal that meant something. The meaning is information, and human beings are all about meaning. And so the solidity of things is solid what? Again, in physics, that 99% of that little piece of gold is absolutely nothing. It's actually emptiness, right? Because most of these physicists know about that. Most of this stuff is nothing, there are little, the illusion, when that is one of the things that I was teaching all the time. It was sometimes freaking out with students, said, touch a table. The table you're touching, that is, you cannot go through the table. It's an illusion. It's mostly made of nothing. It's just the electrons of your hand that are repelled by electron of a table, like magnets almost, and they give you this sensation of solidity. But there is no solidity. All what you're interacting, it's the information of your body interacting with the information of the table. It's all that. But you see, you have to be looking at things in a very different way, right? The physicist way. But
Yeah.
it's the real way. It's very,
Yeah.
this is how
Yeah.
reality is. Most people live in a dream and they don't even understand it.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. There's some sound bites in there. There's two kind of really powerful laws in technology. One, there was, Moore's law, which was Rob Moore and the guys at Intel, said that computing power and capacity, will grow, an order of magnitude, pretty much every year, doubling and tripling and go exponential as we begin to increase our technology. And Metcalfe's law, is a law about, networks and how networks grow exponentially as the number of users or connected nodes grow. The value of these networks and the size of these networks grow exponentially. And so give me the breakdown. I'm really interested to hear, how you came up with, the Bitcoin power law. I think in your model, there's a couple of factors there. There's the number of nodes, there's time, and then obviously how does this correlate with, price and hash rate and these sorts of things. I'd love to learn about the model, why you came up with it, what you saw, how you came up with it. And then, we can get into the recent stuff of what the model's telling us now. But just, I think you've got a couple slides.
Can we share my slides, if you don't mind?
For sure.
Yeah, okay. Because I think that will help us to understand better what I'm talking about. And let me move on in my slides. Okay. So, first of all, I show all the time this slide because I'm trying to say, I'm trying to look at Bitcoin like if it was a science. I'm trying to understand it like I will understand, the table that we discussed before, etc. I'm using all the tools of science. So people resist this. I don't understand why, because actually Bitcoin is wonderful for that. We have a lot of information from the on-chain data. So we can actually analyze it. And in fact, I think it's the only way to do it, because opinions and other tools that people use, but it's nice, can hear what people think about what will happen with Bitcoin, but why not to ask Bitcoin itself? That is actually how science works. Before science, a lot of people had opinion. We are a different philosopher. I studied the history of philosophy. The universe is made of water. Now the universe is made of fire. There were different debates. And then science came along and say, well, let's listen to nature. Let's see what nature has to say. Let's do experiments, because experiments are basically a way of asking nature what the reality is. And then actually the reality of the universe blew out of the water all these opinions. All these opinions seem like little children stories in comparison with how the universe really is, right? All the little fantasy of the philosophers before science. And then science revealed this beauty that was not possible to be understood unless you were paying attention. And so the entire idea is to pay attention to Bitcoin, right? If you look at the price, for example, in a linear chart, that is this chart that most of the time when we show Bitcoin on TV, they use, it looks very chaotic. It looks like, yes, it's going up sometime, then it's collapsing. It's reached $70,000 when it collapsed to 16. And they are always trying to make the point where Bitcoin is unreliable as an investment, in particular long-term investment, because it's so wild. It does all these crazy things, right? And one day maybe it can go to zero. And now there are few people that say it's going to zero, but along the history of Bitcoin, there have been people that say that on a consistent way. And still some people say, like Warren Buffett, thinks that Bitcoin is worth zero, right? That is completely worthless. And then the use of science allows you to see patterns that you were not able to see before, right? So, for example, even just using the log is something that we studied in school, but it's one of these tools that we use because in physics, one of the most important concepts that you are introduced very quickly is that if you want to understand the universe, you have to understand it from what is called the scale. Scale is a very, very important concept. In fact, I suggest everybody to read this book. It's called Scale by Jeffrey West. So look it up on Google. He has also some TED Talks, etc. And it's a book all about this concept of scale. What is scale? And I'm going to use this slide to tell you about scale, and in particular what is the application in Bitcoin. So for a moment, forget the rainbow, that some people are familiar with, but let's focus on what happened when I went from this slide, right, where the price was chaotic, to something that looks much more regular, right? So at the beginning, I could not even see the price because it was too small. The bubbles seemed really, some of them were huge, some of them were smaller, but, very disorganized types of data. When you look at the data in this way, it looks much more organized. And I just did one simple thing. I started to use almost like a mathematical telescope, like Galileo was able to show the universe in a different way by using a telescope. We are using a mathematical telescope that is taking the log of a y-axis. What the log does. So imagine, so I was talking about scale before, right? Scale is when you look at the world by orders of magnitude. What do I mean for order of magnitude? Think about, and why it's relevant, for example, for physics. The nucleus of an atom, right? We live at this level of human beings, but everything we do, everything we interact with is based on the existence of these atoms, right? But they are very, very, very small. Well, the nucleus of an atom is like 0.1401 meter, right? So it's extremely small entity. And then you need to go at least 100,000 times bigger to get the atom itself. So there is the nucleus, and then you change by many orders of magnitude. In this case, every time you change by a factor of 10, you get a change in what is called order of magnitude, right? So you go from the nucleus of an atom, which is 10 to the minus 15, then to the atom, which is 10 to the minus 10 meters. Then you go to things that are maybe millimeters. You go, for example, with the cells, and then you go with things that are in our size, so around a meter. Then you go to the scale of a planet, that is millions of meters, and then you have a galaxy, light years, etc., etc. So physicists are used to see things from many, many, many scales point of view, many orders of magnitude. And when you look at the world in that way, you reveal patterns that you were not able to reveal before. The log, mathematically, is one of the best tools to do that, because if I write numbers in what is called a scientific notation, right? So basically emphasizing how many zeros there are in a number. So you have 10, 100, 1,000, etc. So the log, you imagine you have this box, you put in the number, and it spits out the number of zeros that the number has. So for example, if I put 10, it will give me 1. You see how in the scale here we have a log 10 of the price, right, of Bitcoin. So that 1 there means 10, because I put in 10, it has only 1 0, it gives me 1, right? I put 100, it has 2 0, it gives me 2. I put 1,000, it gives me 3. It's not very difficult concept, right? And now, if I go to fractions, like 1 over 10, which is 0.1, it gives me minus 1. So it becomes a negative number. But it's basically 1 decimal place, so it will be 0.1. 2 decimal places, like 0.01, will be minus 2, and so on. So it's a not very difficult concept, right? But now what happened? By magic, you see, it's not magic, it's math. Sometimes it's actually very similar to the closest thing we have to real magic, is that now you get the price much more organized. You see, first of all, there is a general pattern. Bitcoin seems to go up. It's much more clearer from the previous graph. These bubbles are much more contained, right? And we seem actually proportional to wherever they are, right? So this bubble that went all the way to 60-something seems comparable with this bubble, right? Because it was proportional to wherever it is. This is what the log does. It allows to see things in a proportional fashion to wherever they are. And so you start to see this order and organization. Now, it's also a tool that can be used to find out if a pattern is an exponential, because exponential are processes that we find in nature all the time, because as a physicist also you became an expert in patterns, because you want to understand one of the goals of physics is to try to relate to quantity, right? We try to understand. It's a program that started actually with a countryman, Galileo, right? That he said, listen, let's not do what all these ancient philosophers did, that were just debating and discussing, and everybody was coming up with their opinion. Let's understand reality. And I think he made this hypothesis. Reality is like a book. We can read it. And this book is written in the language of mathematics. This is what he said, right? And then the idea was, instead of expressing your opinion, let's do experiments. Let's use a scientific method to find out what reality is about, right? And since then, you know that from Galileo's time, we did more progress in these last 500 years than in all the other human history. So there is something about science, right? He was right, and that approach gave us everything we have, even these computers that we're using right now to communicate, right? And so we want to, and one of the way of doing that is to find patterns, is to find the relationship between quantity, right? For example, the pressure of a gas and the temperature of gas, how bright a star is and how hot the star is, all kind of interesting things like that, right? So we learn how to find patterns between quantity, right? In this case, with Bitcoin, one of the most interesting quantities, price, and maybe time, right? How a process evolves in time. And this is, taking only the log of a price, and here on days. So time is always measured in this approach, starting from the Genesis block, when Bitcoin was created. It's almost like the Big Bang for the Bitcoin world, right? This is where the origin of everything. So when I say days, here I mean days from when Bitcoin was created. Now, if Bitcoin was an exponential, and exponential is one of these patterns that we find in nature all the time, and it's something to understand what an exponential is. Imagine I have a virus, right, or a bacteria, and this bacteria doubles every 3 hours. So it doubles at 3 hours, it doubles, it doubles, it doubles. If you make a drawing of how many bacteria there are in some container or whatever, as a function of time, it will look like a J. And this J grows pretty fast, right? But if you take the log of the quantity of bacteria versus time, you will get a straight line. Because basically the log kind of is almost like the inverse of the exponential, and you cancel it, and whatever was inside the argument of exponential, it is basically some kind of growth process, will look like a straight line.
So hold on. Let me pause you 1 second. Is this the beef that you because there was a video I think with Michael Saylor and the On-Ramp guys, Andy Edstrom, some of my friends over there. They did a podcast with Michael Saylor, and he used the term Bitcoin is like monetary or like digital algae and exponential. And I think you had something to say there. There was a beef. There was a little, so you're saying in that slide, Bitcoin is not exponential. Like that's probably not the right term to use is what you believe.
I mean, he's an engineer, so he should use the terminology correctly, because a lot of people also told me, well, he's using the word to mean, probably he meant something that is non-linear. That is another word that we can use. Non-linear means something that grows very fast, small changes in one quantity creates huge changes in the other. So if you use the word non-linear, then I will not have other problem. But exponential, and this is one of the advantages of being scientific versus allowing people to talk like normal people. And we want to understand Bitcoin from a scientific point of view, right? Because that is what allows us to see things that you would not be able to see if you just move your hands. Like I'm Italian and I move my hands a lot, but if you just move your hands and that is all what you do, you really don't go deep in understanding Bitcoin. And I think it's one of the things that make us a Bitcoiner, that we are available because we love this thing that is beyond just being an asset and being an investment. We want to understand it better, right? This is why we spend time, we say, study Bitcoin. Okay, what do you study? Okay, beside all the property of Bitcoin, the cryptography, all these interesting things, well, also how it behaves is part of studying Bitcoin. And you want to study using the right terminology, right? That is one of the first things you do when you enter in a topic. Like with Bitcoin, you want to know what on-chain means, what self-custody means, all this terminology that as Bitcoiners we need to pick up. And there are some scientific terminology like exponential that I would like people to pick up, because when you understand what is the difference. So Bitcoin doesn't do the thing that Saylor was saying, and in fact it's a good thing that it does. This is why you want to understand. You want to understand why exponential will actually be bad for Bitcoin.
All right, that's a tidbit. Why is exponential bad for Bitcoin?
Yeah, and let me show you it is not, right? Let's establish it is not, because this graph, you see how this graph, an exponential will look like a straight line in this type of graph. And Bitcoin curves, right? So it almost visually, immediately, we know it is not. Now, you can do more sophisticated tests, etc., but it's very striking that from this graph, it's immediately evident that it's not, because otherwise the price of Bitcoin will look like, sure, with some oscillations or whatever, but it will go along the straight line. It will be like a straight line. So it's not. So first of all, it's reality. It is not. And second, why would it be bad? Well, again, I suggest everybody to read that beautiful book because they go in depth. But in general, so in the book, for example, and also there are TED Talks. In fact, you know what? The TED Talk from this scientist, Jeffrey West, it was actually another catalyst for me. In fact, it was the catalyst that made me look for power laws in Bitcoin. And in the talk, the scientist always say this thing. It's almost like a slogan. He says, cities are eternal, companies die. Because that was the aspect that I didn't have, and it was critical for me because I was very aware of this thing called power laws that I was going to introduce in a moment. And if you don't mind, I can introduce them and then we can discuss the difference between power laws and exponential, because we have a comparison, right? Because I cannot tell you why it's bad if I don't have a comparison with power laws. And power laws, by the way, as a spoiler, is what cities follow, and companies follow exponential. And this is why the two are different in how they evolve. The cities are eternal and the companies die. But if you don't mind, I want to explain what is the difference between an exponential and a power law, and then we can compare them and see why one is great for Bitcoin and the other one is not, right? If you don't mind.
Right. Let's do it.
So now, so if it is not an exponential, because this is again how they train us in physics, as in our quest in trying to find some kind of pattern, some kind of relationship, very precise relationship, almost a holy grail, right? It's crazy, right? You will need a physicist to think, look, there is this very complicated asset. Is there a precise pattern, right? Only a physicist can look for that, because everybody else will give up. We think there is not such a pattern. But in physics, we are so used to look at very complex things and then find a pattern that is not crazy. And so you try, at least you try. So one of the ways you do it is trying to do these type of charts that are almost like kind of like a mathematical telescope, right? First, I take the log of the y-axis. I start to see some organization. I would like to see ultimately a straight line, because people like straight lines. We are simple in that way. The eyes can recognize them. And it's easy, even as a sanity check, to see that there is some very precise organization in the data. Now, sometimes you cannot find this straight line, and then you have to use more complicated tools, to see maybe if there is a pattern. But if you find a straight line, it's almost like you found the Holy Grail, because it means there is some very precise relationship between the data. And so the ultimate tools that we have in physics is to take the log of a y-axis and to take the log of the x-axis. It's our ultimate powerful weapon. And if the data becomes a straight line, then you found one of the most familiar type of patterns in physics, because you find them everywhere in nature. Like I would not say 100% of the physical laws are power laws, but a big number. One time I found online a shirt, I didn't make that shirt, that say, I went to a physics conference and all what I got was a lousy power law. Because it's almost like an internal joke. We found so many of these power laws that when you go to a physics conference, a lot of the talks will be, oh, I found this power law between this quantity and this other quantity. And, we kind of make fun of ourselves. But it is true. They are very, very common in nature. And this commonality, we call it universality, something where many different phenomena, you can go from the motion of the planets, you can describe the relationship between how bright a star is and the temperature of a star, a power law. You can, how far an object falls when you drop it from a certain height, that is a power law. Many, many, many laws in nature, many behaviors in nature can be described as a power law. If you have a power law in your data will look exactly like this. If many times it will look like maybe a fuzzy cloud, right? Because anytime you measure something, you're going to have noise, right? There is always signal and there is always noise in real data, right? But if there is some organization in your data, it will show some kind of orderly behavior, right? And you can see there is a very orderly behavior. It's almost striking. It almost hits you in the face when you see that the entire Bitcoin history looks more or less like a straight line. Does it look like a straight line to you? Kind of, like general direction? Because I am a physicist. I'm used to see these kind of things. I want to know, somebody that is not used, what is your first reaction? When you see a graph like this, maybe you saw it before, but now we are discussing it together. Can you give me your feedback? What do you think when you see a graph like this?
United States debt, our interest payments over time. It's pretty much a straight line up and to the right. But I look at charts all day, so I just sort of,
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but maybe I'll not use it to do it in this particular chart because they require a little bit of training and experience. Because many people, for example, confuse. They think I'm saying that Bitcoin is a straight line. It's a straight line in this space, in this strange space called the log, right? And if you go back to why we do it in this way, we do it in this way because, like I say, straight line are simple. And if I see this general trend that is linearized, let's say, then I can do certain things. For example, I can draw a straight line. Now, when I say draw, I don't do it by hand. I ask the computer to do it for me. And the computer performs this statistical calculation called regression. So basically, regression is find me a line that satisfies this requirement. And the requirement is measure the distance from this line and minimize it. Find the shortest possible total distance from all these points from the line. And that line represents, when you do it in that way, some kind of average behavior of Bitcoin. And then basically the idea, it's an abstraction, right? But everything we do in life is a sort of abstraction. It's a little bit more profound abstraction. We say, forget about all these things that Bitcoin also does, going up and down and changes, like if you zoom in, you will see all these small little changes. Really, the general behavior of Bitcoin, if you look at it's almost like you're taking a drone and you're flying away and you're trying to see the forest instead of focusing on every single tree. The general behavior looks like a straight line in this graph. In fact, it can be described by this line by close to 95%. 95% of the behavior of Bitcoin is that straight line. And why I say that? Because when you calculate this straight line, one of the parameters that the computer gives you, the algorithm gives you, is how well the straight line fits the data that you're looking at. And in this case, we get a value of 95. 0.95 is a number between 0 and 1. Closer you are to 1, more perfect is your approximation. And here we have 0.95. It means 95%.
Hey, if Bitcoin hits between $160,000 to $240,000 a coin by next year, you're going to want to make sure that Bitcoin is safe and secure. And the best way to do that is to master your self-custody skills. The number one place that you can find a one-on-one expert and coach to help you do that is thebitcoinway.com. Their experts and specialists will help you to navigate the journey into self-custody, managing your privacy and your cybersecurity, whether you're just managing your own wallets, whether you're running your own node, so that you can maximize the number go up technology of Bitcoin, but also the freedom go up technology of Bitcoin, which is just as important. Schedule a free consultation with their team today at thebitcoinway.com. Now back to my conversation with Gio.
Now, I worked in many different fields, from astrophysics to neuroscience to finance. Finding a relationship of this kind, where you get an R square of 0.95, is very, very rare. In fact, when I was working in biology, neuroscience, you almost never found it. Almost everything that has to do with the human body, physiology, if you get something close to 0.8 or whatever, you can publish a paper. And in fact, many drugs, development, etc., are based on relationship of that kind, much, much weaker than this, between some kind of, using this quantity of drug versus the effect that you want, right? You can make a graph like that, and if you find a pattern that has an R square of 0.7, 0.8, the pharma industry will come in and spend billions of dollars on that particular compound. Finding something like this, it's almost like crazy. When I found it, I had to redo the calculation several times to make sure that it was correct, because it sounds crazy, right? That you have some financial asset that follows a predictable pattern in such a precise way. And now, that is the other thing that we understand from this graph, that these bubbles, right, at this time when Bitcoin does something different, that is like deviating from this general straight line, it actually doesn't matter, because basically the amount of time that is spent above a straight line and below, they kind of cancel each other.
Sure.
By the way, I show this line here, blue. I discovered this particular power law in time. My first power laws were all the way to 2013, but I was missing this particular one that shows the price versus time. This was discovered in 2018, and I'm showing here in blue the time since it was discovered and the prediction. So you see, imagine I am here when I discovered it the first time, and I tell, because I thought I have a Reddit post where I made a prediction for the future, where Bitcoin is going to be in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And then I came back and I posted 5 years later, and I gave the update. The update was this: look, guys, I was right. In general, Bitcoin, yes, it will go up, it will go down, it will follow that straight line. And I was right. I was already right for several years. What I want to show you next, and then we can have a discussion about why power laws are good versus exponential bad. If you go back to the linear graph, right, because one of the advantages of doing a straight line is you can derive a lot of information, right, this R square, but also you can measure the slope of this straight line. And the slope of this straight line, because of the mathematics behind logarithm, etc., we don't have to go in the details. People can follow me my media where I describe this and explain in the details, but you can go from the slope of this line to an equation. You can write actually an equation that says the price of Bitcoin is equal to some kind of a constant, multiply the time. The time, again, remember, is the time since Bitcoin was created, to some kind of a power, because that is what a power law is. It's a relationship where you have one quantity related to another quantity to some power. You take the power of that, right? Everybody's familiar with the parabola, because we studied in high school, right? When you take...
Man, I was just playing football.
You were playing football. But,
yeah.
Well, okay, so parabola is a quantity. You see, you should have paid attention. Like, you never know, right? When you can use it, it will have helped you to understand Bitcoin. But basically, it's a relationship of a kind, y equal x to the square, right? That is what a parabola is. For example, if you have a phenomenon like that, where, in fact, when you drop an object for a certain height, the amount of distance covered by the object is proportional to the square of time. So if you, for example, you double the time, the distance now goes up 4 times. If you triple the time, the distance goes 9. You see, it's what is called non-linear. You make a small change in the x quantity, you get a big change in the y quantity. with Bitcoin, it looks kind of like that, right? Because we have price equals some constant. I could tell you later maybe what is constant if we have time. But the important thing is this exponent. But you see it's 5.7. So let's round it to 6. You have like price equal time that is passed by since the beginning of a Bitcoin history to the 6. So imagine a parabola where, right, we say 2 times change in the x, so time gives you 4, 3 times give you 9. With 6, it's even crazier. Like, for example, if you double the time, that and this could be the holding time. So imagine I waited for 5 years and the price is such and such. Maybe after 5 years, the price was $300. Now you wait 2 times more. So you go from 3 years to 6 years. The price should go up, according to this equation, by 2 to the 6. And that is not 4, it's 65. So you double the time that you hold Bitcoin, and the price should go up by 65. You triple the time that you held Bitcoin, the price should go up by 720. It goes crazy. The amount of value, the value you were talking about the network, when it turns out that this has to do with the value of the network, goes up very quickly with time, with changes in time, because of this power 6. In fact, if you look at Bitcoin, we go back to the linear chart where we have only the price and not the log, and only the time and not the log of time. Bitcoin looks like this. The red line is the power law. It looks basically like a hockey stick that goes up very, very fast, because it's, you can call it super parabolic, right? Because you have a crazy parabola that instead of being square, now it's 6, right? So it goes really, really fast. And here what I did, I took the moving average of the price of Bitcoin over 4 years. And 4 years is because the bubbles tend to happen every 4 years, right? And so it kind of smooth them out. And not completely, right? You can see there are still deviation. But look how close the price of Bitcoin follows the red line. Red line is the power law in a linear chart, and the black one is the price itself. If I could zoom in here in every single place along the trajectory, I will see always something like that. The price of Bitcoin is basically oscillating around this red curve.
Over and above. Over and above, kind of like we saw in the other chart.
So there is no doubt. I mean, anybody that doubt these things, they don't understand what I'm talking about. They don't understand the math. They don't understand physics. Look at your eyes. How your eyes can tell you that something like this, it doesn't work. Right? It works. It's exactly what Bitcoin does. It's a very good simplification, if you want, but a very realistic simplification. And in fact, if you started to average even more, you will see that the price comes even closer to that red line. So it's really what Bitcoin does. It's a power law. And there are many other tests that you can do, etc. Now, your question was very good. What is the difference between, in terms of meaning? Because the power law goes beyond being a model. By the way, I call it a theory. And let me make the remark, because sometimes I use scientific word that people misinterpret these words. Theory in science is not an opinion. It's actually the highest form of presenting the data in a scientific way. It means you have a very complete, very coherent way of describing the phenomena. So right now, the power law theory can describe almost everything that happens to Bitcoin, because it can also describe why we have the bubbles, how big the bubbles is, why we go back to certain level of support. So it's a full theory that actually wrote several articles on Medium. Eventually I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write actually peer-reviewed papers on this topic that I want other scientists to analyze and give me feedback about. But the entire idea is that this is the essence of Bitcoin, being a power law. What are the consequences? Because beyond being scientific, it's almost like philosophical. There is also a philosophical aspect. So it goes beyond just being a pretty model that is trying to explain the price of Bitcoin. It really gives us very deep insight about what Bitcoin is all about. And what is about is see, we should go back to this graph here. The fact that we have a straight line over so many orders of magnitude. See, when we were dealing here, the price of Bitcoin was less than $1 because 0 means $1. Then we went to regions where the price was $10, when 100, 1,000, 10,000, one day will be millions. At every stage, because of this straight line, it means that the relationship that describes the growth between the price and time was always the same. It didn't change because a straight line, it's all about a very precise relationship between these two quantities, a constant proportional relationship. And this proportional relationship has always existed at every single level. So that means several things. It means that whatever Bitcoin is doing right now is not at all different from what it was doing when it was $1,000, $100, $1, few cents. Has always been doing the same thing. Is always growing in the same way. It is an amazing property, and it has a lot of interesting consequences. The other, because if one understands how power laws are created, is the type of interactions that create these power laws. It's all about many different things working at different levels, right? So the individual people interacting with each other, the maybe like group of people, like maybe small banks or whatever, small investment group, all the way to maybe even nations, right? So all these agents that are working at different levels, when we work together and they operate on this system, that is when you have a power law. This is not when you get an exponential. This is when you get a power law. And so it tells us a lot of things. You can go to this rabbit hole, and we don't have time to cover everything, but people can follow me on my media where I discuss all these things in depth. It means that Bitcoin has all this very, very interesting property. This property make Bitcoin anti-fragile. That means that if there are shocks happening to Bitcoin, both positive or negative, like for example, the ETFs coming in and bringing a lot of cash, etc., and pushing the price away, eventually the system wants to go back to equilibrium. One of the evidence for that are the bubble itself, right? Because you can see, and there is a very striking graph where I can show you this. It turns out, by the way, there is like a support level. Like if you go a certain distance from this general trend, you find this line that catches all the bottoms, okay? And see how striking this pattern is, right? Every time, there are times where we leave a general trend that are what we call the bubbles, the cycles, whatever. Then the price reaches a maximum. And by the way, when we go through these processes of leaving the power law, it is exponential. This is the only time when Bitcoin is exponential. So we go exponential up, then exponential down, but look what happened. We go back exactly where the straight line is. But again, how this could be by chance, right? It cannot. There are very, very precise processes that describe how Bitcoin behaves. And it did it every time. So these are almost like tests of, many people say, what happens when the power laws is broken? First of all, it's not going to be broken. And second, we know what happened. This is exactly what happened. We leave it, we go somewhere, we have fun, and then we come back to it every single time. We have done it many times. That's what happens with many. See, for example, this is COVID. It is, the price was higher than the support line. And then COVID happened. Look what happened. It went to the red curve, and then it bounced back. So both positive and negative event can change the trajectory momentarily, but then the price goes back to the general trend. So we're going to ask that question.
So there's a couple. So I think we want to wrap just with a couple thoughts of like, what are the implications for kind of this cycle? And then moving forward, I want to just open up, folks from Columbus want to start to ask questions in the chat. Please do. We'll try to share them with Gio so he can answer a few here. But my general question is, if Bitcoin's going to do, exactly what it's done in other halvings or other cycles. And by the way, I want to just put this out there. when people look at what it did in the last halving, there's this stat out there that, exactly 170 days after the halving is kind of when Bitcoin starts to make its move, and it peaks about 480 days after the halving. And then they show this kind of these blocks that happen again and again and again. And it's funny to me that a lot of these people will argue with you, but they're literally trying to describe the same thing, right? You're just going about it in different ways. And some may be more mathematically based and some are maybe more visually based, but they're trying to describe the same thing. And I think, whether it's Rational Root with his spiral charts, right? He's trying to show how Bitcoin, as it goes around this spiral, right? It's finding these different peaks of when it goes up and when it goes down. Fascinating chart, fascinating view into Bitcoin. Still trying to say the same thing. And so what I'm hearing from you is that Bitcoin is going to do similar things to what it's done in previous cycles. You've kind of been famous lately for getting on a call and saying, hey, this November, right, Bitcoin is going to kind of make its run and its move. Give me your 2025, your 2030 kind of outlook based upon Bitcoin doing what it's already done in the past. And then as he's doing that, I'd love for people to just ask questions if they had them.
Yeah. And if you mind, as I go and answer your question, let me spend literally 1 minute to conclude that idea why Exponential is bad, right?
Yeah.
Because going back to what Jeffrey West was explaining, it turns out that cities, for example, right, they follow power laws. The GDP of a city, the number of patents produced in a city, the number of gas stations in a city, the number of libraries, all these things follow a power law. Now, when you look at companies grow as an exponential. And Jeffrey always says, listen, find a company that has existed more than 200 years. Okay, there is only one, the Vatican, that is a joke, right? All the other ones died out. And they die out because we grow fast, we grow in this very unbridled way. They are similar, the power law and exponential, there are similarity. The difference with the power law is that there is some kind of a curbing mechanism where it slows down with time, what we call the diminishing returns, right? And Bitcoin does that. That allows the system to expand and grow and adapt to everything it happens to it. So, for example, if you don't want Bitcoin growing as fast as it was growing when it was a little baby, because if that happens, Bitcoin will not be ready to adapt to when it's a $1 trillion asset, to all the things that need to happen, like in terms of security, in terms of the legal framework, in terms of the even psychologically, or all the infrastructure, mining, etc., that needs to be developed to handle a 1 trillion asset versus handling something that is a 10 million asset. So the fact that Bitcoin is actually slowing down, it's a feature. It's a very powerful feature of Bitcoin. This is why nature prefers this growth. And by the way, you know what? The algae that Sailor was mentioning, somebody sent me a paper and say, by the way, the algae grow like power laws. Of course we do, because of only really a lot of bad things grow as
forever, right?
Cancer.
Yeah,
cancer grows because it doesn't care about the environment. It's a mitigated process. It devours whatever is inside you, and then you die. And this is what happened with corporations. This is why Jeffrey West was saying, corporations die, cities are eternal, right? Rome, look at Rome, 5,000-year city that always has existed, for a long period of human history. Nagasaki, Hiroshima, you can bomb a city with a nuclear bomb and they come back, all right? So cities are power laws. Think about that, right? We don't have maybe time to go on the detail. Maybe you invite me another time.
I think it's a great analogy, because like the conifer, right, that's growing in a forest, like unbridled, right? The brush, the forest fire will naturally curb the growth of the forest, right? Or those sorts of things, right? Like there's the natural inhibitors, which is why, this is the Tao of Capital, or Mark Spitznagel, or, Nassim Taleb. These guys talk a lot about kind of when you manipulate markets, you kind of manipulate all of the things underneath of it. And that's why we have more exponentials. We probably wouldn't have as many exponentials in the world as we do. It's because we've manipulated things. So,
exactly.
I'd love to hear your take on, 2025, why you called November, and then Jacob's got a few questions here.
Yeah. So I called November simply because let's see if I can find a chart to describe that.
And what did you call November again? You said
I do have my version of the irrational root clock, and in my case, I show that the beautiful pattern, and we need to give credit to the rational root for this idea of plotting Bitcoin in this way. But if you plot the power law in this graph, you get this white line, and you see this is why there is that beautiful pattern, because Bitcoin is a power law. It's actually this type of a power law is called a power law spiral. And you can see how close the two are, right? In fact, I have even a crazier graph that I can show you for a second when we go to look at this graph. This graph is what I showed you before linearly, right, where you saw the J. This one, the black one, is 4 years average Bitcoin, the price. That is the real price, average over 4 years. And the red one is the power law. See how close we are. It's almost unthinkable, right? It's crazy. This is how powerful the power law is in describing Bitcoin behavior. But so I studied the cycle because in one end, the power law tells you there are no cycles. They kind of cancel each other. In the other, the cycle is there. So we want to understand them, right? We want to see what is going on with the cycle. So one of the things I did, I tried to see if there were regularities in the cycle. So one way to do that is you average the behavior of the cycles, and you see if there are regularities. And there are regularities, and these regularities can be studied. Let me see if I can find the right slide, this one. So in this slide, what I did, I sum together, right, to take every 4 years, and then I superimpose, right? And I saw that every single cycle follow a very precise pattern. In fact, it's almost clockwise. This is why you have a nice spiral, etc. It's very precise when everything happens. And I came up with a terminology that is like a clock. I have time 12 at the peak. I have, the different hours. Every hour corresponds to, so 3 hours corresponds to 1 year. And as you go around the clock, you will go around this cycle. So it turns out, in general, the pattern is this, right? Because this black dot, let me explain what this black dot are. I divided the data in months, and then I average all the cycles in terms of their performance, their price, etc. I measure everything here in terms of deviation from the power law, because in one end, the power law tells you there are no bubbles, in the other, we can use it as a framework to understand everything else. And in this case, I'm trying to describe the cycles in terms of deviation from the power laws. So if you do that, and then you average over the cycles, and you do it every month, you get these little black dots. The little bars here, it's how variable the data is. They are called error bars. And there is a lot of variability because every cycle does a certain thing, right? But if you average it, you get this red curve. You get this behavior. And you see what happens. We go 1 year up, 1 year down, and then 2 years in between, where we follow very, very closely the power law, but a little because of the power law is this blue line, right? The blue line represents where the power law is. We are below the power law, but we follow it almost in a parallel fashion. So we stay under the power law for 2 years. We follow the growth of the power law. So we still go up and go up actually quite fast. We only have 1 year of bear market, and everything else is a bull market with Bitcoin. So you have 3 years of bull market and then 1 year of bear market. The bear market is only this one. And we go down exponentially and we go back to the general trend. So you can actually make predictions because you can say, according to this clock, when the bull market starts. So it usually starts at the end. So if you call this the first year, right? It's a convention. This is a time zero, the peak. Then you spend 3 hours of a Bitcoin clock in downwards, and then you reach the bottom after 3 hours. So this will be here, between 0 and 3. Then between 3 and 9, you stay in this region. And then at time 9, this is when the bull market starts. And the bull market, so here you see I'm wrapping around, right? So in this case, -3 means 9, because reason I did it in this way, I didn't want to have a peak here, so you don't see it well. So it's kind of, imagine you are a kind of in a cylinder,
you're
right?
connecting a single frame. Yeah, I see what you're doing there.
So I'm going back here will be time 9, because it's 3 hours -3 relatively to here, so it's 9. So 9, I'm going back right here. And usually this 9 happens at the end of this second year or third year from the peak, right? So you have 1 year down, 1 year here, 1 year, right? And then 3 years after the peak, that end of the year, it could be November, it could be December, usually November, we start to go up. We start to go up, and then after 1 year, we reach the peak. And you can even calculate what the possible peak is, because it turns out almost everything in Bitcoin is actually mathematical. Even the decay of a peak, the peak seems to be smaller in time. We follow a mathematical pattern. Using that mathematical pattern, you can calculate where the next peak is. So if you want a summary...
So Dr. Jeff Ross said around Q4 of next year, he believed, right, he's a radiologist, but in a different doctor way, right? He believed that he thought Bitcoin would get to 450,000, between 400 to 450,000.
It's very unlikely. So right now, my prediction based on everything Bitcoin has done so far, that is the only, like anybody else that comes and say, I have another way. Which way you have? Where unless it's some magical, incredible, not magical, but this person went so deep where he found some kind of interesting pattern, and he can demonstrate this really correlates with Bitcoin. The only thing we have is what Bitcoin has done before, because everything else is just moving your ranks, right? It's just making up stuff and inventing stories. Everybody can invent a story. Why not you make a story and say, this is my story? I'm telling you the story of Bitcoin. This is all what I'm doing. I'm taking the data and I say, given Bitcoin has done these things and has done it in a very regular fashion, and I follow this pattern, then the math tell us this. So what the math tell us, that we should start to see a bull run in around November, December. So you always, because remember, this math is all probabilistic math. So we always have some uncertainty. You see how I draw all the uncertainty associated with my data. This is how a scientist will do. Yes, there are patterns, but when you're dealing with something complex, it's all about probabilities, nothing certain, right? Within probabilities. So within these probabilities, then we should start to see the bull market happening. It will reach 200,000. Again, what is the possible upside and downside? I will say 20%. So anything within 200,
150 to 240.
240. That is a good range in terms of the variability. In fact, I did also see, it's called Monte Carlo. I can show you this Monte Carlo simulation because they are super cool. So what you do, you take all the statistical properties of Bitcoin, and then you run simulations. That is this. This is what I did, right? So I did it for all the different cycles. Basically, I found equations that describe how we go up, how we go down, and then we motion around with power law. And I tried to simulate. So every black curve here represents like a kind of an alternative universe where using the same stats, using the same property of Bitcoin, you run the simulation, because the sequence, like imagine you're tossing a coin, the coin is always 50-50, but how the particular sequence of toss, it depends on the history, right? So if I get 3 heads on the row, 4 heads on the row, and you will get a different price every time you run this simulation. But you see, the statistics will make you go within certain range. You cannot go beyond these ranges. And you see how well my simulation, with the black lines, I can do 1 million of these. I can do 10 billion, so whatever. You see, they are all following. And you can even, by the density, how many of these paths are close to the real price, how many go far away, how far away. You can come up with all kinds of interesting statistics. And you can see very, very rarely we go away a certain range, right? So we can use that as our range for the future. Here in the past, right? So this is the first cycle, the second cycle, the third cycle. And this on the left corner, left top corner is my prediction. Once I say, look, it really works very well for all the other past bubbles, let's apply it to the future. So the future should look like this. Where, we go whenever the bull starts, let's say November, then it reaches a top of around 200,000. Now you have some variability, like you handle it right, anything between 160 maybe all the way to 140. That is the likely range. And then we go down all the way to about 65,000, something like that. And then we continue on the power law. And we continue, right? The power law says we should reach $1 million in about 10 years from now. And then 20 years is close to $10 million. But this is the near future, how it's going to behave according to the math, according to the statistics, etc. Now, can we go all the way to 500? Very, very unlikely. Bitcoin will have to do something that is different from everything else it has done so far. Could it be? It's not excluded, right? You can never exclude anything. But right now, if you look at the data, if you look at the patterns, if you look at the regularity, the beautiful regularities in Bitcoin, this is what we are expecting.
Someone said, imagine Bitcoin ending up at 58K again after the peak. That would be pretty funny. All the memes that would come out that day. Well, I think this sort of answers some of these questions. If I could go back to answer some of these questions, Ashley asked the question, is there an indicator that GL uses when the top of the cycle will be? Well, typically based upon what I've seen and I understand and what the charts actually show, right? There's 3 years up, there's 1 year down. And so there's 1 year where the Bitcoin goes exponentially up. There's 1 year where it goes exponentially down. There's 2 years that it goes sideways. So there's 2 years where podcasters and people like me are trying to, create great things about this content, right? This is when you should sharpen your sword, right? Educate yourself on Bitcoin as it's continuing to consolidate for 2 years. And then it kind of goes through those same cycles again.
Let me correct you a bit about that. When we move sideways, and remember, we are moving along with power law. So we are moving with the power of 6. It looks sideways. In comparison with the exponential growth.
Correct.
We are spoiled by this crazy growth.
But gradually forward.
Yeah.
Right.
Remember, 65 times. If we only moved along the power law, we will go up 65 times if you double the period, right? For example, Bitcoin has existed for 15 years. If you projected 50 years in the future, it will be 65 times. But it's crazy, right? And you also can calculate the yearly compounded interest, right? So for example, right now, if we only moved along the power law, we will do 46% a year. But I will not call that sideways, right? It looks sideways in comparison when we go, 3 times, 4 times, 10 times, right? How was happening before in the bubbles. Now, this bubble, we will go 3 pair. In 1 year, we go 3 pair. In comparison with 46%, is going to look like 46% is sideways, but it's not sideways.
Right.
If you compare it with other assets, Bitcoin, even when it moves sideways, it does crazy things like growing 46% a year. Now, that 46% a year, because it's not an exponential. If it was an exponential, it will be always 46. Always, this is how you get an exponential. The power law, unfortunately, but also fortunate because it's good for the system, that interest goes down with time. So in 20 years from now, in 15 years from now, will be close to 20%. But, you are going to have 15 years of time where Bitcoin goes anything from 46 to 22, but it's still the most amazing asset on earth, right? Now, if you don't mind, I want to show you this slide because the question was about the indicators. If you don't mind, I want to show the slide about the indicators. So I do have indicators. I don't know if you allow me to pitch a little bit myself. There is this site where you can go. It's called Beat Poseidon. I don't know if you want to put it in the links. beatposeidon.com, and you can find my indicators. So I have like a Discord community that you can join. There are about 800 people right now, so you can come. We discuss these things. I spend a lot of time because I'm a professor. I like to talk. You can see from this interview. And people come. We discuss. We have meetings. Like today, for example, we come together as a group. We talk about the market. People have questions. So it's a very cool community. So if you want to join, go to this site, beatposeidon.com, and you will find links. You can join our community. And as a perk of joining the community, you get this indicator. We have 8 of them. One of them is also about MicroStrategy, for example, because we found a power law between MicroStrategy and Bitcoin. So we have a model with liquidity, where we consider liquidity. There is an entire other history about Bitcoin. Maybe you should invite me a second time and we can discuss about all these other things like liquidity and so on. But this indicator is really cool because you see, look, I did this. So first of all, you have all the different power laws, you have a clock, but the bottom line is really cool because I created almost like a risk measure of how close you are to the peak, basically. And it goes from 0 to 100. And you see, basically, I took away this decay because we see a decay of the peaks. And so because it's an equation, even that is an equation, you can include it in your model, Ria, and you can see how nicely every time there is a peak, almost in a surgical fashion, the indicator can tell you where the peak is. Peak here, peak here, peak here, and where the bottoms are. And so together with all these indicators, we can analyze where the peak and the bottom are. Now, I know there is some controversy because people think that the power law is all about selling at the top, rebuying at the bottom. No, we talked for 1 hour about all the beautiful mathematical patterns, what it means. That is really where the Bitcoin power law theory is about. Now, like any science, can be also used as a technology. And the use of this technology, because it's such a private, such a personal thing, it's up to you. For example, in my case, given that I went through all these cycles and I saw my portfolio being millions and millions of dollars to crash 80%, and when that happened, I always wish that I sold some of it, and then I could have used whatever I sold to buy back Bitcoin, because I calculated, see, that 65 that I told you, in the next 15 years, it becomes 1,200 if you use the bubbles, if you sell at the top and buy at the bottom. Now, do I suggest to sell everything at the top? No, never. Sell a little bit, maybe 5%, 10%, whatever you think is right, if you like this idea. Or if you don't like the idea of selling Bitcoin, then you can do other things. Like, for example, if you do DCA, why don't you put aside, let's say, I suggest every young people like you, Dante, put $100, $200, what you can afford every single month. I do it. You should do it even more. And as you do this, maybe you want to start to put a little bit more money on the side. I know it's fiat. It's just temporary. Buy something else, buy gold, do whatever. And as you climb here, buy less and less Bitcoin and put the same amount that you will have saved somewhere in some other asset. And when Bitcoin goes down, then start to buy back Bitcoin. Because if you're doing that way, you're optimizing this approach, right? And you're not risking anything, right? Because if you do it in a moderate fashion, you can go 80-20, 70-30. I don't tell you to do it, in an exaggerated way. Do it where you do use a little bit the fact that Bitcoin has these beautiful curves, and you use the knowledge of Bitcoin, the understanding of Bitcoin because Bitcoin has two powerful things. One is this general trend that is very reliable, very powerful. And then it has also this period where it goes to Cancun. So you're using these to your own advantage. Try to understand it. Try to go deep. Don't do anything degen. And maybe this is something useful, but you can still extract some of the volatility of Bitcoin to multiply your Bitcoin. Do it in a careful way. And like I say, there are many different approaches where you don't want to sell your Bitcoin, or you don't want to do anything crazy like options, right? People are looking at options. Why not? The degens and the crazy people are the people that are like religious fanatics, says, don't do anything, just hodl. Well, then, okay, don't even talk about Bitcoin. Go take a vacation for 10 years, do anything else, and come back in 10 years, then come back in 15. Why do we even care what happens to Bitcoin in this bull run? It's actually frustrating to see Bitcoin going to 200,000 and then crashing to 70. If you study and you work out, etc., and you understand better all the different options, and you make a plan, ahead of time, maybe you can use some of that volatility at your advantage and get more Bitcoin. This is all what I'm saying. I'm not telling you do what I'm telling you to do. Study the opportunities that are there and try to make sense of that, right? And then it's up to you at what you do with it.
If you want to engage with people and experts like this in a one-on-one fashion, not just through trying to reply to them on Twitter, join Columbus, the online digital community to help you navigate your Bitcoin journey. And with that, let's get back to the show. Wow.
That is my suggestion, right?
No, thank you. Thank you, Gio, for joining us today. And I do want to put the website up here today, Jacob, joincolumbus.com. We want to bring Gio back. I saw that. We didn't have time to get into it today. The power law with MicroStrategy, how MicroStrategy is sort of hacking the markets, and it's sort of following this kind of not exponential, but sort of a power law path that Bitcoin is, but in an equity or security fashion. So maybe we can bring you back on. Maybe that could be a shorter segment just talking about MicroStrategy. But I put your website there for people to come and to engage. And I'll send this recording out to our hundreds of members that we have in Columbus. And really excited for people to kind of continue walking along their Bitcoin journey. There's a lot of questions that people have about Bitcoin. And what I've learned in my time, it's just we're all trying to discover as humans. You said this in the podcast. We're all searching for meaning, right? We're trying to consolidate all of these things. Our mind's constantly doing it, right? How do I simplify this thing and make sense of why I'm here, or what is that log? Is it a log or is it a crocodile, right? Your mind is constantly doing that. And that's all we're trying to do at Columbus. We're trying to help you to simplify this new frontier, this new world, and make it very tangible for people. And I think, Gio, I think you really helped to do that today. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your model. And I will send your information out to members and other people after this. But next up, in our next conversation, we will be having a multi-sig expert come on, and we will be going through live, how do you take custody and self-custody of your Bitcoin? Because if Bitcoin does what Giovanni or all of these people say that it's going to do, right? If the power law continues to be the power law, then you might want to think about, how do I secure it? Right? How do I manage it? How do I store it? How do I protect it for 15 years so that if I do fall asleep and come back and check the markets and it's at $1 million, well, I have it in a secure, safe place. So that's going to be our next talk. We're going to go through live with a multi-sig expert and even walk through demos of how do you do a multi-sig contract and sign transactions in Bitcoin, which is scary for a lot of people. Gio, any closing thoughts?
Nothing. Bitcoin is this marvel. It looks almost like science fiction. It's wonderful. It's a real science fiction. It's a science fiction that I say, okay, yeah, it does follow with physics laws. So you're a person that, by listening these videos and listening to Dante and other, I'm so amazed by young people like you that join this, right? And I joined when I was a little bit older, and I really admire you, and you are a special person and very bright person, and you can understand these things. Just go deeper, study Bitcoin, understand Bitcoin, because it's like one lifetime opportunity that we all love. And so I'm very grateful to you, Dante, for this opportunity to reach many people, and you're hosting me in your show.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. All right, we're signing off for today. This is Dante with Bitcoin Simply. Happy stacking.